Why would you ever use a set of historical miniatures rules meant for ancient warfare and use them for the American Civil War? Well, we did. If you watched our Gettysburg Part 2 video, you can see the results. With a few tweaks, we transformed Age of Hannibal into Age of Lincoln and ended up with a beautifully simple large-scale ACW game. And we are giving these rules adaptations to you for free. How did we do it and why? Let's take a deep dive into Age of Lincoln. Hey everyone, today we're doing something a little different. Not so much a rules review as a deep dive in how we converted a set of ancients rules to American Civil War.
Exactly. Well, what were you looking to accomplish by taking an ancients rule set like Age of Hannibal and turn it into something, like the Civil War?
Right. Well, I guess I've always had in my mind, first of all, that the higher you go in your game, meaning, moving corps or divisions, right, as opposed to George Luz fighting in the street in Carentan, right? The higher you go, the more abstract everything becomes, right? And the more you kind of have to just see outcomes as opposed to how you get to the outcomes. So I've often thought that the 7 Years' War is very akin to Alexander, right? Because in Alexander, in the center, you have these pikes which kind of push, and then the cavalry fights on the flanks. To me, that always felt very reminiscent of large-scale 7 Years' War, which in the center, the muskets are just pounding away, and there's cavalry trying to win on the flanks. And I was like, that sounds like ancient. So that's always been in my mind. When it came to this particular set of rules, I was keeping in my mind that we had to film a game, and we didn't want a game that was too complicated, because the more complicated the game, the harder it is to film, really, and translate, right? So we kind of talked about Altar of Freedom, but there's really that complicated bidding system, and we just thought, I don't know, I didn't want to do that. And I thought that Age of Hannibal was so elegant, right, that I thought, well, why can't you convert it? Because it's at a pretty high scale. If every piece is a brigade, right? Brigades, when you read about in the American Civil War, it's like, the Stonewall Brigade charged in and they drove them back, right? That's what you need to show. Not that the Stonewall Brigade went in and then this regiment did this and this. I mean, you can do that, but that's not what this game is about.
Right.
So I felt like at that high scale, it would work. And it would also be something that would be easy to film and easy to play. So if you're looking for a set of rules for your club, right, that some rules don't quite fit, but maybe with a few tweaks they will, I think this is what we tried to do here.
Absolutely. And speaking to the ease of play, you guys set all this up. You guys played all of this in the club while I was away for a couple of months. And, coming back to play it and film some of it, and even some of our, past times during the weekday games, I would say it was fairly easy to pick up. Of course, there were always a couple of, hey, remember this, remember that, as always. But, overall, I didn't feel like I wasn't playing a Civil War game. And I didn't feel like it was too difficult to be like, oh, I remember that now. I can now move this way, or I can do this in combat and whatnot. Overall, it was fairly easy to pick up.
Cool, and that's a really interesting point, because Austin had no clue what we were doing, and he showed up and we were like, you're playing this game called Age of Lincoln, and he played it. And, if it felt like the Civil War, that's really great.
Yeah, I mean, sitting on top of, what was it, Cemetery Hill over there, just taking Ewell's men, fighting back. It felt like Gettysburg. So I can only, say much claim and accolades for this rule set, taking that much abstracted top view and making it interesting to play on a little more of a smaller miniature kind of battlefield.
Cool. Well, should we talk about what the changes were?
Yeah. What were some of the rules changes you made? How did you adjust it? And
So there's really only two big changes, right? One thing that I loved about Age of Hannibal is the morale system, right? Where you have a number of morale points that equals the number of troops you have, which gives you actions.
Right.
And as your troops get beaten up, then you lose actions and you lose morale points, and eventually your army collapses. So I really liked that. We had to change it for the American Civil War because we're in the corps system. So we wanted corps to kind of get fatigued and pull out of the fight, not the entire army of Northern Virginia collapses all at once, right? So then we came up with the idea of corps having their own morale on both sides. And there was a little bit of a trickiness. How did we work that out? But we figured it out. And basically, you're just keeping track of how many hits a corps does and how many it takes. And if a corps inflicts more than it suffered, it's okay. But if a corps suffers more hits than it dealt out that turn, it loses a morale, right? So then if someone's getting beat up and they're not doing much, their morale's going to fall. And that seems to work out pretty well. So you might have a situation where, the Confederate First Corps is really pounding hard and they just start to fall apart. At the same time, Confederate Second Corps, someone else is still pushing, right?
Right.
Which just kind of works out pretty well.
We even played around a little bit with some of the historical differences, like what if Hood came around to the right? And you can even play it just as the normal historical play, but having that change up was fairly interesting for sure, especially with that morale system you're talking about.
Right. And we were able to tweak it on the second day of the battle, right? Third Corps and Second Corps for the South were a bit shot up, right?
Right.
And so how do you coordinate an army? What if someone's shot up? We were able to build that into the morale system very elegantly, where we gave the South a handful of points, morale points, to distribute to the Corps, right? And they can kind of generate more until that Corps attacks. Once the Corps launches attack, they can't get any more morale. And so the question is, when do you launch the attack? Do you wait until you can generate more or not? And it's, there's a bit of die rolling there, which was really kind of a cool way to get at Civil War armies had a hard time coordinating,
right?
And it's not perfect. Nothing is, but for a simple game, it seems to work pretty well, and we can do, I think, anything with it, which is great.
Absolutely, and one thing I will point out is, playing some other Black Powder games like Napoleonic Age of Eagles and some other like Napoleon's Battles, sometimes artillery doesn't always play an important role, and in this game, I felt that it did play an important role. You were able to hit targets, you were able to soften them up, and if you do a really good job, they get pushed back, and that presents you maybe a hole in the line or maybe an area that you can push that corps into.
Right.
I think overall, cannon actually makes a difference in this game, and we have plenty of it, so it's even better.
Yeah, that was, so to talk about how we changed units. So if you look at the numbers, you'll see that your basic Civil War infantry brigade is the equivalent to a spear unit, right? In Age of Hannibal. That's kind of your basic line unit, +3, I think it is, right? Yeah, +3. When we came to artillery, now that's a big deal in the Civil War, right? The interplay between infantry and artillery and artillery. So originally we just said, well, artillery will be archers, and they can shoot. Brigades don't really shoot because, again, when we're just considering a brigade attacking, is volleying, meleeing, whatever, they're just attacking. So when it came to artillery, we decided to make it archers, but to give the effect of kind of like Pickett's charge, when you're moving across the open, you're getting shot up, we made a really small but critical change in the sequence of play. When you get to the fire phase is before movement, but the enemy fires in your turn. You never fire in your own turn. So what that means is when you're getting ready to launch Pickett's charge, the enemy fires a barrage at you first, and if you get disrupted, you're stuck.
Best of luck.
Right. So that little tweak really made it feel a lot more like the Civil War. When we had it the other way, it was too easy to launch Pickett's charge, essentially.
Right, and when the Confederates are on the attack, a lot of times when they're engaged with the Union line, their artillery doesn't have a whole lot to shoot at until the next turn when the English have their say in the battle. So it makes it, like you're saying, coordinating is very important. And I think this system has a pretty good, and especially the rule change, has a really good job at making it challenging for a commander to figure out what he's going to do on the attack.
Yeah. So I think those were like I think really those are the only two major changes. And when we were thinking about changing the rules, we had to think hard about what makes the Civil War feel like the Civil War. And for us, it was artillery had to feel right. And when a corps breaks, it had to feel right. Because that's what you're reading about. You know, they're breaking low, we got them on the run, right? But the whole army never, ever broke at once. That's what Robert E. Lee wanted, right? He wanted to collapse and crush an entire Union army. It never happened. So I feel like we got it. We have a rules that everyone has fun with, that we can play in an evening. That's important for us here. We don't really like to have games that we keep set up for weeks to play. Mm-hmm. And we could also use our figures. I would have to say that there was a little bit of finagling, because in Age of Hannibal, the units are on squares.
Right.
And that's done very purposefully. You can turn to flank. It's very easy. We're using the basing from Altar of Freedom, which has these, rectangles for infantry and squares for artillery, and that made it a little weird. And so basically, if you use that basing, you just all have to agree how things are going to go, right? We just all said artillery will have the same width essentially as an infantry base, and you just kind of go with it and just be gentlemen about it, really. All right, what else we got? Anything else on this?
I think that covers most of it. We talked about all the different rules changes and rule hacks that we did and whatnot, and especially what you were trying to accomplish with this particular rule set. And the actual battle we did was fairly epic. It has this sprawling, battlefield.
Oh, I remember. We're going to make the rules free. So you can go to my website, fireballforward.com, and we'll have a one-pager that has the rules changes. Also, it'll have our sheet, which has all the stats for the units. Essentially, there's really only three stats: infantry, artillery, and cavalry. We made cavalry kind of like skirmishers in the game. So they have, they can fall back, and they fight. They fight kind of like how I feel Civil War cavalry was, which is stand in the way and fall back when they have to. So we'll have that free on fireballforward.com. Try it. If you want to see any other battles with us using Age of Lincoln, let us know. Not sure I can do such a great board as this. This board has a story in itself, which when I do my game room video, maybe I'll let you all know about. It's kind of funny. So.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us this time, and please don't forget to like and subscribe and join the MGR Army.
Yes, join the MGR Army and subscribe. Thanks. We'll see you next time.